Moving right along, we are in video number 2 of Chapter 7, Hypnosis of the Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn. It appeared that as children, all of the women had lived for the most part in a fantasy world of their own, very often shared by imaginary playmates that were real enough to touch, see, and hear. As adults, none of the group spent less than 50% of their time in fantasy, and the majority estimated that a full 9/10 of their time was spent in an imaginary world that coexisted with their ordinary one. For instance, they could fantasize at work without actually losing concentration for the task at hand. It was common for a word or a sight or sound to trigger their imagination and almost literally transport them to a place that the sensation conjured up. For instance, the name of a country was enough to set in motion an intense living fantasy of foreign parts. One subject during an interview about her abilities enthused, "Fantasy is being anything you can be, could be, or are. It's possibilities made possible. It's soaring, thrilling, living. Who's to say what's happening right now is reality?" Most intriguing and convincing for Barbara was the fact that the fantasies didn't stay firmly entrenched in the nebulous realm of the mind. They had physical manifestations, which were often measurable. Most could reach orgasm by sexual fantasy alone. 11 out of 14 who were asked admitted to having had at least one phantom pregnancy, with all the associated symptoms of lack of periods, breast changes, cravings, and the feeling of fetal movements inside. They could experience heat or cold just by imagining it. Experiences of telepathy, precognition, and the unintentional or intentional summoning up of lifelike apparitions were all part of daily life to the somnambule women. They could also remember their childhood in amazing vivid detail. Few of the women, it transpired from the interviews, realized that all other people did not regularly have similar experiences. The women came from all walks of life, and most were emotionally stable, usually living with a long-established couple relationship. All these findings were reported at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Study of Mental Imagery in Minneapolis, June 20, 1980. Various psychiatrists have, independently over the last few years, come to the conclusion that unwitting abuse of self-hypnosis may lead to the emergence of multiple personalities and exotic type phobias. Mr. Eugene Bliss, a Utah psychiatrist who studied 14 cases of multiple personality, found that the patients all created their first personality early in childhood to combat loneliness or insecurity, could all remember their childhood in detail, and were all easily hypnotized. They could also distort their own higher brain functions so as to reduce or enhance sensations or block out memories. A patient whom Dr. Morton Schatzman had written about in The Story of Ruth came into treatment because she kept seeing apparitions of her father. Taught in treatment to create such apparitions for herself, she could summon apparitions of anyone at will. In one scientific investigation of her abilities, it was discovered that if she summoned an apparition of her daughter to sit on her lap in such a way that the apparition's head blocked out the light from a lamp, Ruth's brain actually registered no response to the light from that lamp. Psychiatrists Frankel and Orn, in an experiment on hypnosis as an effective cure for smokers and phobias, found that no phobic patient was unresponsive to being hypnotized, whereas many smokers were, and that the more phobias they had, the more susceptible to hypnosis they became. The psychiatrists wrote in Archives of General Psychiatry, These findings suggest that individuals who develop phobic symptoms must have the capability of manifesting the kind of mental process where images and fantasies can become sufficiently vivid and real to be confused with the world outside. The ramifications of such findings are wider than just the possible discovery of what lies behind hypnotic suggestibility. However, even in more traditional hypnosis research, it has long been asserted that imagination plays a part in creating suggestibility. Hilgard, from assessment of the personality types most associated with somnambulism, claims that early childhood experience plays a strong part and stresses imaginative experiences. Interests such as music and reading, which require a strong personal involvement in the activity itself, and also excessive parental punishment, which could lead a child not only to become obedient and reliant, an ingredient in responsiveness to hypnosis, but to withdraw into fantasy to escape. Sarbin and Lim also linked imagination to susceptibility. By judging people's abilities to play act given roles, the researchers were able to establish that those who were most easily hypnotized were also those who could most easily assume a part while playing acting roles. Role-playing itself is seen as the main constituent of hypnosis by researchers such as Martin Orne, another leading investigator in the field. Orne, professor of psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania, carried out a now celebrated experiment to prove his point. He claimed that the so-called state of hypnosis was created by the combined wish of the hypnotist and subject to fulfill each other's expectations. Cues as to what is expected are given by the hypnotist and picked up on by the subject. In his experiment, Orne gave a lecture to two different groups of students about hypnosis. One group was told that the state of hypnosis was signaled by the subject's inability to move wherever was his dominant hand, and a demonstration of this fact was arranged. The other group was not told any such thing. Later, Orne hypnotized volunteers from both groups. Those who had seen the immobile hand demonstration all found they couldn't move their dominant hand when hypnotized. Those that had not seen the demonstration could move both hands quite freely under hypnosis. Orne concluded that people act under hypnosis as they think they are supposed to act. If they are keen to please, they can be hypnotized to order. More will be said about Orne's theory that a subject must not only want to be hypnotized, but have a positive relationship with the hypnotist when hypnosis against will is discussed. Hilgard took issue with Orne's findings and carried out an experiment designed to show that more than role-playing is involved in hypnotism. He had 20 students thrust their arms up to the elbow in ice-cold water so that he could record their normal pain endurance. Then he hypnotized 10 and told them that they would feel no pain when he asked them to immerse their arms a second time. The other 10 were told the same thing, but while not under hypnosis. In the event, Hilgard found that the suggestion alone that they would not feel pain was sufficient to increase tolerance to the cold, but that it fell far short of the tolerance exhibited by those who had been assured while under hypnosis that they would not feel pain. And I'll stop it right there because my phone is ringing, and we'll pick up in the next